always been a successful gardener, but I've made some changes that made a huge impact on the results, and I want to share those with you today. There were some years where I planted my seeds right in the ground, and there were some years where I tried starting them in a greenhouse, and there were some years that I tried using these little pucks that you just soak them and they swell up. I will never use these again. They might work fantastic for some people, but they just don't work for me. It wasn't until I switched to using a heat mat under my seedling trays that I started to have some success. I was doing a lot of things wrong. I also switched to using a seed starting mix instead of using potting soil or dirt from my garden. Yeah, I tried all of it. I didn't start early enough, and I finally learned how to read a seed package so that I could go 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost or 10 to 12 weeks before the last frost. That has changed my gardening world. So in previous videos I've told you about the almanac.com website, and where you can plug in your postal code and it gives you your last frost date. I know that my last frost date is about May 8th. And I usually give about a week's grace on that, 7 to 10 days. So I wait till about May 18th before I start putting my seedlings out. I did a recent video on the way that I store my seeds. That's different than most people would think to approach it. I don't sort these into all of my tomatoes in one and all of my peppers in another. I sort them according to the date when they have to be sown. I used to do my seedlings all in front of just a window, and I, cross my fingers and hope. Well, that wasn't good enough. I've made a change, and I now have some LED lights. I like this style because they string together. They just plug into one another, and I can set up a strip of lights that runs the full length of the shelf I've got my plants on, and I put them on a power bar, so I just flip the switch on the power bar to shut it off. You could also do it on a timer if you wanted to set them up on a timer. And that's made a huge, huge difference. I'm going to start planting some peppers. I think this is 18. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. This is just a red bell pepper that I'm starting right now. And it tells you it should be started 6 to 8 weeks. I find my peppers never do very well, so I'm going to just do this tray and push it a little bit earlier. I need a lot of peppers, and I don't mind starting 2 sets and hoping that I get a larger harvest in the end. It suggests to make them 1/4 of an inch deep, and they'll take 1 to 2 weeks to sprout, 7 to 14 days. I'm only putting 1 seed in each cell, and if it doesn't germinate, I can put another one in, 1/4 of an inch. When I started using heat mats, it made a huge difference. So what I do is I plant these up, and then I'll water them in with a light spray. This is a pressure bottle, and I just got this at the dollar store. I'm sure you can get it at the Walmart and Canadian Tire or whatever your garden centers are, but that one's from the dollar store. I start my seeds according to the seed package, the date, and the depth, and then I put them in a dark location to start on a heat mat with the humidity dome on top. The humidity dome and the heat mat only stay in place until they're germinating. Once I have more than 50% germination, I will, that's half the tray, I will pull them out and put them in light at that point. They don't need the heat mat any longer, and they don't need the humidity dome any longer. It can actually cook your plants or encourage mold growth. We don't want mold growth. We want seedlings, right? We want them to be healthy and strong. Now, peppers are a heat lover, but that's once the plant gets established. You can use a regular spray bottle for this, and I just want to lightly mist the top of this. The soil was, the starting mix was moistened before I started, so that It's nice and even and packed in there reasonably. It's not packed like hard like a snowball. Some seeds do better to start in these small 1-inch square cell packs. And when you transplant them out, like herbs, I would grow my herbs in there and then transplant them out and they'll be just fine. Tomatoes, when you start growing tomatoes, the leaves all start to get tangled up together and they make a bit of a mess and they get too leggy. And they need more nutrients than that little tiny amount of soil can provide. I'll start my tomatoes in a container like this. I just got those at the dollar store as well. And that gives them more nutrients for the roots to expand and for the soil to absorb the fertilizer I'm going to put on it and all of that. And I'll do peppers this way too because I also don't want those getting crowded and connected to each other as they grow. So yeah, I've had an herb garden that did very poorly, and I've had an herb garden that did very well. Well, when I moved in here, we moved here about a year and a half ago, and I've had one season on this garden, and it did amazing, absolutely amazing. I still have over 50 jars of tomato products in the cupboard, and I grew 45 tomato plants. Those 45 plants provided me with over 200 jars of tomato sauce, tomato broth, salsa, green tomato curry, green tomato curry, and every year we just add a little bit more, figure out what we want to experiment with this year, and one of this year's experiment is these habanero peppers. See how that turns out for Dan. I don't know if we need 14 plants of them or not, but we'll give it a whirl. These this year I'm planting all organic or non-GMO or heirloom, whatever I can find of that particular plant. Now I found some non-GMO corn seed, and I thought, oh, fantastic! That's got to be a rare thing to find. I bought 4 packages. It turns out it's a hybrid, so even though it's non-GMO, it's still going to be something I can't save seed from because the following years the seeds may not be true to the original plant. After I get these planted, I'm going to start watering from the bottom or possibly misting them from the top, but I won't mist them so much that the plant gets knocked over or damaged. You want to keep the soil around the roots intact, so you don't need a whole lot of pressure on it. That's where watering from the bottom is helpful. It leaves your plant intact. Last year we had recently learned about lasagna gardening, and I really want to go with organic and practices as much as possible. Whether my product is ever certified organic or not, I don't mind if it's organically grown, organic practices. This year we're hoping to have a garden market stand, farm gate stand, so that people can come to our property and get fresh produce. We'll have eggs and fresh produce and some seed starts if I've got extras, and pumpkins and sunflowers and all kinds of things. In order to support having a market stand, you kind of have to plant a lot. So this year, Dan would like me to cut back on the amount of tomatoes I planted, and I'm thinking if I'm preparing to sell to other people, I'm not cutting back on my tomatoes. I might plant more. 45 plants last year. Oh, I've missed a step. I need to label these. Don't forget to label your plants. There's nothing worse than having a tray full of tomatoes or having 4 trays of tomatoes and they're all identical, and you're kind of going, which one's the San Marzano and which one's the Roma and which one's the beefsteak? And now I got to plant them and I don't know which one's which. So remember to label them. I will individually label them later so that I can put them on the market stand. But for now, this is going to start. I've taken a plastic milk carton and I've cut them in shapes. I started with this idea that I got from Amazon or the dollar store or something, and I just kind of replicated it with a piece of plastic off of a milk carton. So I've written on there what kind of plant it is and the date that I started them. I'm not sticking it up so high that it interferes with the dome. I want to show you another thing I've done that has been like a game changer for me. I'll just tell you about it. I use an app in my phone called Sunflower Countdown. So I set May 8th in the app, and I use the countdown feature set into the weeks, because you can adjust the units you want, whether it's days or weeks or months. And I just wait for that to show me that it's 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is. And then I know when it's time to start planting, and I don't have to panic. I just look at that every now and again. How much longer are we? And there we go. So these I've got into individual pots, as you saw, I'm sure. And this one, I'm going to set this one as leeks and onions. I do in a large flat, and I just set up some rows, and then when you go to plant them, you just break them apart loosely anyways, and they go right in the soil beautifully. When I'm planting my onions and leeks, I plant them in a tray rather than into individual cells. And this is just a tray from a takeout dish of salad, or we like the gyros from Costco. So this is just a takeout tray from some deli food. I've washed it and sterilized it like I did with everything else, and I've divided, the soil is damp, and I've divided the I've made some rows. Oh, how deep are these supposed to go? 8 weeks before, so ½ an inch deep. That looks good. And does it say how far apart? Germination 7 to 14 days. Onion seeds are very tiny. I swear this, the lights and the heat mat have been the greatest purchases. So that's it for now. That's going on a heat mat in the dark, and I'll leave it until it germinates. And I'll see you next time.